Hi everyone, Pastor Steve here. Just want to talk a little bit about the CBC, CBDC, the central bank digital currency that is currently being pushed by our banks and the elites and also government interests as well. And basically, what that's meaning is that you may have noticed that there's a push to phase out cash and use electronic payments and payments through the internet and with our cards everywhere we go. And the reason I want to make this little video today is because in recent years, several times when I have gone to places for food, to a restaurant and other places, there's no option but to only use your credit card or a digital payment. They won't accept cash anymore, even though cash is still legal tender here in Australia. Anyways, today, my wife and I, Glory, went out to a restaurant in Blacktown, a place where we have been before, and the food is great there and the service is good there. It's not a problem. But the fact is that they've now decided that they don't want to accept cash as payments. And so we decided we'd make a stand today and we refused to go in. We said, no, we're not going to pay unless we can pay with cash, basically. And they told us their reasons for it. So they cited security reasons. And we said, no, that's not a good enough reason. That's not the real reason, basically. Tell your boss, I know it's not your fault, mate, and just tell your boss that the reason we're not going to come in is that you guys no longer accept cash and it's still legal tender here. And we went somewhere else and where they accepted cash and we bought our lunch there. And the reason that it's important is because what's happening is bit by bit, companies and small businesses, as well as the bigger ones, are forcing us into a cashless society. And, like I'm not against paying with credit cards and, with cards and so forth. And I still do that for certain bills that I pay and so forth. And, and it's just a reality. And it is much more convenient doing it that way in some ways. The problem is, though, when we don't have a choice. When we don't have a choice, we no longer have freedom. And this is what I see as the danger of what's happening with this programmable digital currency that is being slowly introduced into society, where more businesses and more places that you go to will no longer accept cash. Now, we saw the problem with that just recently here in Australia when Optus went down and one of the banks, Westpac, went down and nobody could do transactions because they weren't accepting cash, and they lost business. Their businesses went under for the day and the banks couldn't give out money to people and things like this. We saw what happens when we become totally reliant on digital currency instead of having the option of cash. So and I saw this beginning to come more frequently during COVID. During COVID, some places had signs out there saying, we would prefer you pay with card rather than cash because cash will spread COVID, which was a load of garbage. We all know that most of the stuff that we were told during COVID was exaggerated or was a complete lie. And it always comes back to this thing about being controlled. And the banks and the governments of the world would like nothing more to have more control over how you live your life. And if there's no cash, then governments and banks and other interests that have their finger in the pie with money can control your movements. They can control your spending and they can control your bank accounts and where you go and what you can spend your money on. And that's what this will lead to eventually. Now, we see an example of this already happen in communist China, where you can't go even on a bus or a train or anything without having your card with you to use to pay for the fares or buying food and things like that. Basically, cash has been phased out by and large in China. And if you buy something or say something or do something that the Chinese Communist government does not agree with, you start to lose points on your social credit system, and you get to a certain level, they will freeze your bank account until you come back into line. Now, we live in free societies where you think that's never going to happen here. Now, human nature is the same the world over, and people that are in charge of nations, sometimes they love to be in power and they love to tell people what to do. And we saw a warning come our way during the COVID season. Now, whatever you think about happened during the COVID season with the COVID virus, I'm not saying it wasn't a real virus. I'm not saying people didn't die from it, but we already had a pandemic plan. And if you look back in recent medical history, we always we quarantined, the word we used to use, the sick and the vulnerable, and we let everyone else get on with it. We went the other way during the COVID, and suddenly our governments in free democratic countries took away our freedoms. They took away our freedom to move, to leave our homes, except for what they considered essential movements. We were allowed to go out for an hour a day. We had to have border passes. We had to sign in everywhere we went through electronic devices. And basically, we were being monitored. We were being controlled. And a lot of the things that they did, as we now know, didn't make sense. They'd say one thing one week, and a month later, they were saying the complete opposite. The fact that there were thousands of people still going to the shops every day, when a disease is supposed to be so bad that we weren't allowed to leave our homes, none of it made sense. And we for a season there, we had our freedoms taken away. So, please don't tell me that our governments are not capable of doing something like China did in the course of time. And what we're seeing is that they want more big government, the big pharmaceutical companies, they want big farming industries, so they'll take away the small farmers. That's why they're trying to shut down a lot of these small farming businesses now, so that basically that will be controlled by government as well. And it's a form of communism that is beginning to arise in the free West. And what will happen is, if they manage to get rid of cash, what will be the fallout for us is basically that all our cash transactions will be monitored. They'll know what you're spending it on. They know what you're buying. They'll know what you're donating to. They will have access completely to your bank accounts. And if you are not in compliance with what the government of the day says that you are allowed to do, they can freeze your bank accounts. And, that doesn't happen in free and democratic countries. Well, go to Canada. Only 2 years ago, the government of Canada decided to freeze the bank accounts of all those truck drivers that were complaining and protesting against the vaccine mandates, and anyone who supported them suddenly found their bank accounts suddenly illegally, really they were done illegally, frozen. And don't tell me that won't happen if we become a totally cashless society. This is the danger with it. So, like I said, as long as we've got the options to use cash and cards and digital currency, I have no problem with that. It's like what I heard somebody saying on a forum called Unheard. Like some people like to use Uber now. But what happens when the only way of transport is that you have to go by Uber, and you don't have a choice to ride a bike or to own your own car anymore? That choice has been taken away from you. Basically, there's a monopoly on how we would travel, and some people will get left out of the bubble. And suddenly we get that thing which we've been hearing from the World Economic Forum, that you will own nothing, but you will be happy. But someone will own it, but it won't be you. It won't be us. And what they can do if they have complete control over our cash and our bank accounts is they can decide how much money you're allowed to keep in it, how much you're allowed to spend this month, and if you spend it on what they consider the wrong things, then they can stop you from using your bank account. There's no anonymous donations to causes anymore. We can see that where this would go when and if the wrong type of people are in charge at government level and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen in the next few years. It may or it may not, or we're there yet. But the reality is that somewhere along the way, and we've already shown great signs of going down that path where we want to be, our governments want to be more controlling of our lifestyles, where we can travel, when we can travel, what we can drive, when we can drive. They're even talking about 15-minute cities where you won't need to move more than 15 minutes drive from your home. You would have these zones that you would have to live in. You can see that there are people already in positions of power and influence in our culture today that would love to have more control over your life, and if they get their way, they will do these type of things. So, like they could shut you down at any time if they wanted to. I'm just going to give you, this is a thing that I got off a newspaper called the Australian Light. If you'd like to go check it out on the website, you can download it for free. But this is just about the programmable digital currency, and how that would spell the end of freedom for us if cash goes by the wayside. And like once upon a time, to talk like this, it was the church, there was Christians like myself that were talking about this because of what the Bible said. And this is what the Bible says in Revelation 13. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. All right, so once upon a time, only churches were talking about a time where you wouldn't be allowed to buy and sell unless you went along with the prevailing political ideology. And once upon a time, it was only the churches that were talking about that there would be a cashless society. No one could ever see that day coming. Now, I remember when I first started going to church, so this is the late 1980s, I was working in a printing factory. And at that time, nearly everyone in Australia got paid cash in the hand. If you may remember that if you're old enough. You got your cash payment you had a pay pack. You would go home, you would spend your money or put some into the bank as you wished and use whatever you needed. And nearly everything was paid by cash in those days still, even though people were using credit cards and other forms of digital currency at some level already. But most places it was still cash, and the workplaces were still cash. And they wanted to bring in that we would get paid directly into our bank accounts. And I remember being the only person in my workplace of about 70 people that voted against it. I still wanted to be paid in cash. And I explained to the people at the time, in my limited understanding of the Bible, that there is a teaching in the Bible that talks about a time where there'll be a cashless society, or it seems to be alluding that there will be a cashless society. You won't be able to buy and sell if you will do away with cash. And like all the time that there's cash available, you can go under the radar, so to speak. Well, if that's done away with, then this controlling of our cash will mean that we will be forced into corners and to do things that we don't want to do. And it would be very hard to hold out against that. And I sort of tried to explain that. And people just thought, oh, he's just been, speaking religious stuff and it doesn't matter. So everyone voted for it. And I warned them. I said, look, we can't trust the banks. Even if there's a reason they're doing this, it's going to be not good for us in the long run. And then what happened was within a year or two of all of the workplaces, by and large, paying everybody into their bank accounts, what the banks then did is they started to introduce bank account fees, where it meant that if you had less than $500 in your bank account every month, just one day out of a month, they would charge you a $2 fee for the privilege of having your money put into their bank each week when you were paid. And there was no way out of this, because if they have tried to do this before, it was compulsory for payments to be made into the bank where you worked, then everybody would have just shut down their bank accounts and they wouldn't have been able to carry this out. And that was the beginnings of the banks being more in control of our cash. They already had their finger in the pie. They've made billions and billions of dollars out of these bank fees that I don't know if they still do it today. But at one point, up to not too long ago, I even changed one of my bank accounts because they were doing it still to another bank that wasn't charging me a bank fee for less than $500 in my bank account for each month. But this is all part of that same thing here, where the greed of people that are in control of our banks and our financial institutions was already showing more control over our lives. And now we're seeing the next phase in it where they want to do away with cash completely so that they can completely have control over us and our financial lives. And the Bible was written. This part of the Bible was written nearly 2,000 years ago, and we're seeing it become true in our day. But why I'm saying this is because once upon a time, it was only people like me and other Christians that would talk like this. But in the last 4 years since COVID happened, I have heard more and more people that are not churchgoers, that are not necessarily Christians, but have their eyes open to see what is happening here. And they see that we are entering into a time where a lot of this stuff is now on the verge of becoming true, and we are losing our freedoms. We are losing our rights, if you like. So I just want to make you aware of this. What I do is I go to the websites or the Facebook page of these businesses, and I put up a review and I put up my thoughts on it and at least have my say on it. And then I share it with people and I tell people what I think about this. And you can do the same too. What I do, while I've got the choice at the present time, I choose to go to another business that will accept cash in hand, because they still give me that choice. And I will do that until I can't do it anymore. But at the moment, I can still do that. I can vote with my dollars and I can vote with my feet. And I encourage you to do the same. It's about pushing back on those who are trying to control us in different ways. And just remember that our government is at this present time, and the World Economic Forum is pushing this with governments around the world, that they want to get rid of misinformation, disinformation off the social media. And by that, they mean anything that the government disagrees with is misinformation and disinformation. And so one day you won't even be allowed to talk about this type of stuff. And you truly won't be able to do anything unless you have that mark of the beast. Like if you live the way the world wants, in other words, and you just say what they want you to say, do what they want you to say, think what they want you to think. This evil entity and like this push towards one world government, one banking system, one form of currency. It all sounds good, but we all know that mankind is corrupt. And when man has power like that, then the people that are underneath them suffer. These are just in closing, these are some other reasons why a cashless society is not good. Some people get paid cash. They do a job for cash in hand, and it helps them out a little bit with their ability to, stay afloat. And it's between them and the person they're doing it with. You do away with that, those type of jobs are gone. Tech companies, they've heavily invested in electronic transactions, but hackers are always one step ahead. We've seen this happen with, as I mentioned, Westpac and Optus. And this will be something that happens more often. And if we've only got electronic payments, if you're like me, I've had my account hacked and misused by someone other than myself. I've taken money out of my bank accounts. It's happened to me several times. That never would have happened to me before the internet and before everything, banking and everything was done online. So that would be something that you will be a victim of more often in the future. If cash dies, your location and purchases will be tracked automatically. If you're on government funding, they could restrict you from spending the money on whatever you want. For instance, just say they decide, and there are some people that are already pushing for this in in democratic countries that the Bible is no longer legal to be bought. And if you buy a Bible, you've done something that is illegal, then you could have your bank accounts frozen. Now, I know that that's not necessarily happening in Australia at this moment, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility and other things besides that. I'm just using that as an example. Cash also allows you to make purchases anonymously and donations anonymously. If cash dies, there will be no such thing. The government and the banks will know everything about you, what your spending habits are. There will be no privacy in that sector anymore. Also, people in abusive situations, they're often reliant on their abuser. So if there's no cash available, then it'll be much harder for them to escape that type of control over their lives. And as we know, the elderly and people with some disabilities are not really up to speed on technology, and they can be controlled, vulnerable to scams, and it also makes it more difficult for them. I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of banks are closing down their ATMs even in small rural areas, and it's much harder for people that are elderly or got disabilities that can't drive to access banks, to access cash, or even digital stuff. Like they're not up to speed going on the internet to do this. And then we're reliant on the technology every day, everywhere we go. You'll need the latest devices to pay pay for wherever you go. And it will make bigger problems than it will solve in the end. You won't even be able to leave your home without some sort of device with you, because otherwise you won't be able to function. And cash protects you from being at the mercy of electronic forms of payments during power outages and looming high energy costs. All right, so that's just some of the reasons there. I know it's a fairly long talk on this video, but please listen to this and share it with people, and go and do some survey online about this stuff and find out for yourself how cash is still king and we still need it. And boycott those places that won't accept cash. There's no reason why they have to do that. That's valid. And you have the right to say, no, I'm not going to go along with it. And until we do it, and this is the problem, we saw this with COVID, and we're all guilty of it at some level, or most of us are. We just comply, and we do what we're told. And in the end, they just take more and more of our lives away from us. And it's only by the grace of God, I believe, that we've got our freedoms back at the level that we have here in Australia. And it could have gone that way completely. We may have lost what we had forever, but for the grace of God. And coming back to what the Bible actually says, people say the Bible's a load of garbage. It's outdated and has nothing to say to today. Well, here we are, Revelation, telling us 2,000 years ago that there'll be a time where you won't be able to buy and sell unless you comply. And now we can see how that would happen in our day and age, even in a country like Australia. All right, God bless you guys. I hope you get something out of this and share this with people so that they can become aware of what is happening today in our world right before our very eyes. The Bible is becoming true right before our very eyes. Praise the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.